Welcome, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm the program coordinator with DCR's Division of Water Supply Protection here stationed at Wachusett Reservoir. First, I want to thank you for coming. Thank you to the Boylston Library for having us. My job as outreach and education coordinator is to help people understand how to protect the drinking water supply right here in your own backyard. And so I do guided hikes, I do school programs, and I'm fortunate enough to work closely with the rangers here, and they just put their heart and soul into the job. And you will see by this presentation that puts together history and fishing, which I didn't think went together at all at first. But it's a pretty amazing presentation, so I hope you enjoy. It will be about an hour, and then we will save time for questions at the end. And if you are online, I will also be hopping on there. If you have any questions, you can put in the chat. And I'll hand it over to Will.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So my name is William Anderson. I'm one of the ranger supervisors here for the Wachusett and the Sudbury reservoirs and watersheds. Just a little bit of my background. I've been here at Wachusett for 12 years. Definitely have kind of gotten a passion for it through starting here, working my way up through the ranks, getting promoted. I definitely have a soft spot for history. Definitely consider myself a history buff. You know, disclaimer, I don't know everything. I wasn't here, obviously, for a lot of this. A lot of it's research, any anecdotal stuff that you have at the end. Love to hear it for sure. So basically, this program came about in a kind of interesting way because I went to wildlife to look up just some general kind of stats on fish in the reservoir. And believe it or not, they didn't have a lot. Quabbin had stacks and stacks of data and information and creel surveys, historical stocking reports. Wachusett didn't really have a lot. Quabbin's always been managed a little bit different. The fishing program there was mandated by law in the 1950s to allow boat fishing from taking the Swift River Valley. We didn't really have that. You know, we were created about 35 years before the Quabbin, so it was a little different, and the management's been a little bit different. The great thing about this is it's raised a lot of questions. You know how it goes. Once you start digging, you keep asking more and more and more and wanting to know more. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. A lot of it comes from working with Mass Wildlife, our own people in DCR, our biologists, our aquatic biologists, and also, believe it or not, our archivists. A lot of this information is all from, you know, stuff that's been saved throughout the years, you know, internal to the agencies that manage the place here. So we're very lucky that those were saved and we still have them. So we can kind of dig into it here, and if you have questions, absolutely at the end, we can go through. All right, so again, it's going to be about the history of fishing. It is a little surprising. It literally does span over 100 years, and the back half of the program is essentially, well, what is fishing like here at the reservoir today? What fish species are in there? How do we manage the fishery and things like that? So a little bit of background just on the reservoir and the watershed. We are the largest hand-dug reservoir in the world. You can imagine this is the turn of last century, 1900, mostly by hand. You can see the carts here with the laborers working with their horses. There were steam engines at the time, but the steam engines were hand shoveled with coal. We didn't have diesel engines like Quabbin did, so we truly are the largest and the last hand-dug reservoir in the world. And with our sister reservoir, Quabbin, and the Ware River intake, we provide clean and pure and exceptional, I would say, drinking water to 3 million people in Massachusetts. And an interesting way to think about that is half the state's population. 3 million people might not sound like a lot in general, but the population is only 6 million in Massachusetts. It's mostly metropolitan Boston, but for those that don't know, Clinton drinks our water every single day. They have their own filtration plant. The city of Worcester uses it as an emergency backup. City of Leominster uses it as an emergency backup. With our current conditions with drought, this is the time that they would be tapping into that. And there's also 4 to 5 communities in Metro West, Northborough, Southborough, that also use the water on a daily basis. So it does not only have its natural aspects for Central Mass, it does have water supply for Central Mass as well. So some quick facts just to get some context, history, you know. So it was approximately a 10-year project. The acts, the laws to create the reservoir were passed in 1895, but actual construction didn't start until 1896, and it finished in 1906. It took about 2 years to fill, first filled in 1908. It holds about 65 billion gallons of water. As you came up here today, if you saw the reservoir, you might notice it's a little low. It's actually not because of the current drought conditions. It's been lowered purposefully because the dam in Clinton is actually being worked on right now. They've started disassembling some blocks from the dam for some surface work. If you have the time, I would definitely recommend checking that out. That's about 37 miles of shoreline, and it remains an unfiltered water supply. And that's truly the key to a lot of our management practices, rules and regulations, and why you can and can't do things here, is because we're literally one of the last unfiltered water supplies in the world, and the quality of the water is so high. We've won national drinking water awards numerous times. It's because of the multifaceted approach, public access, pollution control, Title V, sewage things, there's so much into it. So many things to encompass keeping this system to be unfiltered. That is our goal. So, some alphabet soup for you, so you don't get confused as we go through. We are a state agency. The names have changed over the years. At the time of construction, original construction, it was the Metropolitan Water Board that put the acts in place and started doing the work. That was 1895 to 1901. In 1901, the Water Board was combined with the Sewage Board until 1919. And what I'm sure most of you will be familiar with, from 1919 to 1985 and 2003, it was the Metropolitan District Commission. They were in charge of water, sewer, and parks for metropolitan Boston. There's two different dates, because in 1985, the water division of the MDC was spun off, given to a new authority, the MWRA. DCR now, the current agency, is responsible for the watershed and the reservoirs protection. The MWRA is responsible for distribution and treatment of the water that we provide them. So we're kind of like a team, but we're together, but we're also separate, and it's a good approach. We both have our own interests, but it's an aligned for pure water for the residents to drink it. 2003 is when state parks and the MDC were merged. It used to be environmental management and MDC. They put them together, and now we're the DCR. Here's just a general overview of the system. You can see Quabbin to your left. Ware River is in the middle. You might notice there's no open water source there. There's no surface reservoir. There's a facility that you can kind of see right there, that gray building. It says Ware River intake. That shaft 8, they can seasonally take water directly from the river, drop it down an intake, and go backflow to Quabbin. It goes around some baffle dams, and I think they say it takes up to 5 years for it to come back around to the intake. It gives that raw river water time to settle out, nutrients, pollution, things like that, before it gets picked back up. It can go both ways. It can directly fill Wachusett if it was ever needed to. Then you see us here. You see our watershed, all that green, our reservoir, the red line down to Marlboro, John J. Carroll Water Treatment Plant. Again, our water is treated, not filtered. They use UV light and ozone bubbles to kill bacteria and to treat the water. And basically from there, we have our emergency backup system, the Sudbury Reservoir, that's in the Marlboro Southborough area. And then from there, it's all distribution in Boston. Another noteworthy thing on the bottom, you can see it's all gravity fed. There is no pumps. Pumps are in Boston to distribute homes. The system works on gravity. It's all pressure from Quabbin to Wachusett to Sudbury. Here we have our current version of our fishing. Kind of gives you reservoir. Some things to note on there. You see the cross-hatched area. We had a question earlier about the no trespassing areas. So that's a lot of property here in Boylston and a little bit in Clinton towards the intake. The red line across the northern basin and goes over to the other side by the North Dike. This area, this North Basin area, it's protected from either public access or shoreline activities like fishing, because we are mandated to not have any shoreline access within 1.5 miles of the intake. There's just inherent issues with it, with pollution, trash, water contact by persons. So that is a federal mandate that DEP makes us follow. We have to do it. The line has changed over the years. It used to only be restricted to the North Dike, the dam, and the South Dike. You could fish day 3, 4, and 5. they increased the limit in the late 1990s, early 2000s, from a mile to a mile and a half. That's what pushed us down to gate 6. So here's another version. This is 1971, hand-drawn map. It's really neat. Something I like to point out here, the changes, right? Entrances to fishing areas by foot only from Route 70, gates 3 to 20. So this is during the time where you were able to fish those areas a little bit just to our north here. They mislabeled the South Dike. It's a little concerning. It's not where it's written. It's actually where the arrow's pointing, but they tried their best. And then you can kind of see some things, 70, 140, 110, Thomas Basin area is the little tail. You'll never be able to not see this if I tell you the reservoir looks like a T-Rex facing backwards. You're never going to see it the same way again. So let's start off right in the beginning, right? 1890s. On June 30th, 1899, the Metropolitan Water Board votes to allow, until further order, fishing in Sandy Pond in Clinton and the south branch of the Nashua River above the dam site. So before construction has even started, the authority that's going to be building the reservoir has allowed public access into the construction area specifically for fishing. This kind of sets the trend for how our predecessor agencies managed public access from here on out. So here's a picture of Sandy Pond. This is in December of 1896. This is now a sunken pond in the reservoir. This area is off of the North Dike, and the easiest street to go down is South Main Street in Clinton. It's a dead end right to one of our gates. If you came up on the North Dike, look at the reservoir, you'd be looking directly down into Sandy Pond. And at this time, fishing is still allowed, even though the construction project will be starting soon. Here's another view of Sandy Pond in 1902. A lot of changes, right? Land stripping, we have bluffs open, but I don't know, yeah, it doesn't have the pointer, but you can see right here, there's a sign and a signpost right on the shoreline. I don't know, but my guess would be it's probably referencing fishing and public access. I don't know why else it wouldn't be there. So it's probably saying that the area is open to fishing. And here's a picture of Sandy Pond from Burdick Hill. Anyone from Clinton? Burdick Hill area of Clinton, elevation of water is 350 feet. It's a good time to say we measure the depths of the water by elevation to Boston city base, which is essentially sea level. So this is 350 feet above sea level. That's not when we're full at 391. So it's got a ways to go. But you can see Sandy Pond, all the bluffs around it, the basin that will start to fill up, and all of that stone is the riprap of the North Dike. And the water will only be about maybe 2 or 3 feet from the top of that stone. So it's got a long way to go. So now we get into the 1900s. August 13th, 1909. Project's finished, right? Construction of the reservoir is complete, and now the Metropolitan Water and Sewage Board votes to open Wachusett Reservoir to fishing by special regulation. As soon as the project is done, they understand the need and the desire for fishing, and it's opened. So what do you need now to do this? Special permit was required. Permits are only available to residents of Boylston, West Boylston, Clinton, and Sterling, our 4 towns directly around the reservoir, and also residents of the Metropolitan Water District, which is essentially at the time, generally inside of 128 Metropolitan Boston. It's 51 communities now. It was less then. It was in the high 20s and low 30s at that time. But just think about that. This is 1909. Automobile is there, but not really day to day. Everyone has one. We're kind of still in the horse and carriage kind of era. But if you live in Boston, you can take your horse out and you can fish at the Wachusett with a special permit. And contrary to popular belief, ice fishing was allowed on the reservoir during this time. It was westerly of Greenhalgh Point and Sawyer's Bluff. Sawyer's Bluff is gated right down the road, right after the Tohoto High School, that parking lot right there. You go in that gate, right out to the point, the narrows there, and those bluffs that you can see is Sawyer's Bluff. And that's essentially the reservoir west of the narrows. And we'll show you where that is. So here's an old topographical map. Greenhelch Point is that little part that juts out. The Narrows of Sawyer Bluff, Gate 8 is right there. West of there was open to ice fishing. Very close to today's current fishing limit. And keep in mind the population at the time. 1910s now, population still very low in the area. 1920s, April 29th, 1921, previous regulations are repealed and ice fishing is now prohibited in all areas. This is speculation, but I would guess the water levels always change in the reservoir, depending on demand, weather, drought conditions, it's always moving. And when you see ice out on the reservoir, that does not mean there's water directly below it. Many times it's feet below it, and you'll see the ice crack and jut. My guess is people fell in, had contact with the water. Now it's a public health concern. That's likely why they stopped ice fishing. Not to mention, it's extremely dangerous. Now we're into the 1930s. May 27th, 1936. Salvage work was done for stocking other Commonwealth waters after severe flooding by the Department of Conservation, Division of Fisheries and Game, which is now Mass Wildlife, what you know as Fisheries and Wildlife. And the Metropolitan District Commission, which you now know as DCR Watershed Rangers. Salvage work is really interesting. It's something now they would never dream of doing. It's literally going into a water body, netting and pulling out that native fish population, going to another water body in the Commonwealth and dumping it into that water body. Today, we know a little bit more about it. You have aquatic invasive plants, aquatic invasive fish species. You'd be introducing things into this other, resource that probably shouldn't be in there. So this is something they do not do anymore. And is the reason why you can't transport live fish. When you want to go and measure your fish for a state record, for a catch and keep record, by law, you have to kill the fish because they do not want you transporting live fish that could end up now in another water body. These are some great photos that were in the archives of DCR and at the time the MDC. So this is in 1936 again. We have Eugene Holtman, who's the commissioner of the MDC for everything, water, park, sewer. We have Ernest Dean, the commissioner of conservation, which is fish and wildlife. And we have Patrick here, director of fisheries and game. An interesting note here is you see 20 Somerset Street, Boston. That's where all the environmental agencies used to be headquartered in the MDC's headquarters. It's since been demolished, and I believe it's part of Suffolk University now. So here in the upper left, we've got a pickerel and a bass. I can't really see the lines. It may be a largemouth, could be a smallmouth, but that's essentially what we have. We have pickerel and smallmouth. Same thing down here, and you look at the size of the fish, you can tell it's huge, football fish. So this is only 30 years after filling the reservoir, and we already have a great fishery getting established. Continuation of the salvage work. Again, these pictures were taken by Arthur Kitson. So now, based on the land, the water, this point, to me, this looks like by the dam in Clinton. This looks like the spillway is just out of frame and the dam is behind them. It's really hard to say. It could be somewhere also by Greenhelch Point in Boylston, but it's tough. It's difficult, but that's my first guess just seeing the photo. We have these large seine nets they're putting into the reservoir. They're trolling along, picking up all the fish, scooping them up, and then they put them in a truck full of water, and off they go. And here's another one. Based on the background, I feel like this is off the Main Street Circle right here in Boylston, now Gate 10. The topography just kind of looks like that to me, but I could just be reading into it. And this is William Whitaker. He's the NBC. So, 1939, the reservoir is closed due to drought conditions and concerns of wildfires until at least the 1940 season. The Hurricane 38 had just happened. It destroyed millions of board feet of timber and the forests that we had, our natural protection to the reservoir. Now, all that stuff is down inside our property, right? It's a mess, I can imagine, and they have literal years worth of work to do to clean up all this wood. So they've closed the reservoir this time, and there's something else coming up very soon. 1940s, December 8th, 1941, national war emergency is declared, and Wachusett is closed to all public access. People photographing the dam have their cameras confiscated and the film destroyed by the MDC police. Fishing is now prohibited during the war emergency. Conservation officers, which many would know as a game warden or now the environmental police, are transferred to the MDC for special guard duty at the reservoirs. A few years later, May 10th, 1945, just after the victory in Europe, VE Day, the MDC votes to allow fishing again after the victory in Europe. Fishing season during this time is only July 1st to October 1st. They likely gave themselves a little bit of time until they opened for fishing to take down all the other types of deterrents and things that they had during World War II. But it's interesting to note that they decided to open it back up to public access before the victory began. 1950s. So, lake trout are first stocked in the Quabbin along with rainbow smelt, which is a forage fish for larger fish species, in the 2 following years. 1953, walleye eggs were obtained from New York and were reared in the bass ponds at Palmer for a subsequent liberation at Quabbin. I like that line. It's directly from Fisheries and Wildlife at the time. It was just so well written. So think about this. Lakers are going into Quabbin. We're going to touch on this later. 1958, smelt reproduction so successful that the intake screens at Quabbin that bring the water into the aqueduct to come to Wachusett are clogged. Yep, Laker introduction is successful after 3 attempts during the decade. They didn't take right off. It did take a little while, but after 3 very large stocking attempts, they took off.
So the smelts were the bait fish?
Correct, and we still have them. 1959. Now the MDC starts a smelt control program in Quabbin using copper sulfate to kill smelt eggs in the tributaries. 5 tons of adult smelt were removed by net, by hand. That's how many smelt had just taken over. As soon as they were introduced, they spawned in the tributaries and just took over. And we'll touch on what they do now. Shoal spawning is documented during the time that they're taking all of the tributary smelt out. They introduced the bait fish to try to help the introduced species have something to forage, have something to eat and grow. They may not have realized just how, voraciously they take over, and now it's affecting the water supply mission. They want to do a good thing and help the fishing program, but now it's impacting the main purpose of the reservoir. It's impacting water supply. Move up into the 1960s. 60-61, walleye stocking program at Quabbin is discontinued. The water was too infertile and too acidic for the species. But oddly enough, they still introduced 900 final walleyes for some reason, it was an undisclosed lake in Massachusetts to Quabbin. They wanted the walleye to take off. It just didn't work. Quabbin, I'm probably gonna mess up the pronunciation, oleotrophic reservoir, basically very low nutrient, extremely clear, cold, pure water. It's not the best type of water for some species. Some like more nutrients, darker conditions. The lake trout love it. 63, 64, Quabbin investigation showed that lake trout were now reproducing in the reservoir. So this introduced species is now becoming self-sustaining. May 2nd, 1963, very interesting. The MDC votes to allow fishing on Sundays for the first time. Many of you may remember something called the blue laws, certain things you couldn't do on Sundays, alcohol sales, there was a lot of them. One of them was for the MDC, fishing on the reservoirs. So fishing wasn't allowed on Sunday until 1963. I really like this below, it's just a little note card. This is the rules and regulations from the Water Division to fish in the Wachusett Reservoir. This came with your permit. When you got your permit to fish, it came with a little index card of what the rules and regulations were. If you go through them, it tells you about the inhabitants restriction only at this time, 4 towns in the water district. Shall be from shore, tells you no voting, and except at the dam and dikes. Says the time on the permit, the fishing season was determined as they sent it out. During daylight hours only, sunrise to sunset, tells you no fishing north and south dikes. Sanitary violations will not be tolerated. I like that sportsmen should endeavor to see the regulations included in this permit are strictly adhered to if they wish this privilege to be continued. And they talk about no food, bait boxes left behind, no fires in the shoreline, must carry a permit and be shown on demand, and it will be revoked if you violate any of the above conditions, and you must have a sporting or fishing license. All of these regulations are essentially the same today. Not much has changed other than the residency permit and a few other minor things, but even our regulations today have a lot of this carryover. 1968, lake trout and rainbow smelt stocking resume at Waban, and they start studying streams for the intakes. 1969, MDC removes the residency requirement for fishing permits, now open to all who apply and hold valid state fishing licenses. At the time, cost was 25 cents. You could get it at the power station below the dam, also known as like the lower gatehouse. That was the MDC headquarters. You could go, at the time, you could drive right in there and go right to the power station, get your permit, and go fishing. 1970s, which is somehow 50 years ago now. Here's our map again. Now a map is coming with your permit, give you a little bit more information about the reservoir and areas you can fish, other than a little mistake there with the South Dike. Has our rules and regulations. Our fishing map looks exactly the same today. It has the bathymetry, the depths now of the fishing areas, but it's the same essential map, and the rules and regulations are on the back. Tells you a little bit of Wachusett, Sudbury, Wachusett and Sudbury. Basically the same things were on the index card, and it's February of 1971. So 1970, permit fee increases to 50 cents and again to $1 in 1971. I can imagine that didn't go over very well at the time, going from 25 to 50 to 100. It's quite a jump in percentages. 1972, screens are finally installed on the intake works at Waban. So here we have a letter from Alan Grieve. He's the director of the water division, who at the time is responsible for protecting the reservoirs and the watersheds. He's writing this letter to John Sears, who's the commissioner of the MDC. It's an environmental impact study regarding night fishing at the Wachusett Reservoir. He basically goes on to say, here are some arguments for and against. He says, arguments against the use of public water supplies for fishing in part are as follows, but he doesn't say specifically at night. He just says arguments against fishing. Pollution load will be greater. Fishing's not the problem, rather the hazard of human wastes being deposited in the water or along the shores. Fishing trips or family excursions increases the number of visitors. Greater difficulty of control causing higher maintenance costs, litter is likely to increase. Cost of maintenance and policing the grounds, and public use creates a fire hazard. Then he says arguments for allowing night fishing are as follows. There's no great objection among water division, should be on a trial basis. Due to the difficulty of policing the areas, poaching is being done anyways, and fishing is being done at night, even though it is technically prohibited at the time. Some fish are more easily caught during the darkness, catfish, suckers, things like that. No need to establish new facilities. Shouldn't be any adverse effects to bird or animal life. And if basically what they're trying to do is be a good steward to the neighbors, to the people in the area. They think, well, if we allow this, the public's perception of us may increase. And then the true sportsmen, with whom I would include night fishermen, are good friends of the water supply system. Signed and sent. Well, here's something interesting. Here's a letter to a representative in the area at the time, coming from the executive secretary of the MDC. He's confirming they voted to allow fishing at Sudbury and Wachusett 24-hour basis. Between the fishing season at the time, April to October 1973, they're going to put a note with everybody's permit packet, just letting you know. So if you see a whole bunch of your constituents out there at night or wondering what's going on, we're allowing night fishing for 1 year. There's never a reference to it again. They did the trial basis, and clearly it was a massive failure, and they went back to their regulations in place, that sunrise to sunset, basically, daylight hours only. They tried. So this is pretty cool. This is believed to be 1973. It says the record breaker hoists a northern pike caught in the Quinnapoxet River near Wachusett Reservoir, which would be West Boylston. Fish was 46 inches long and weighed 21.5 pounds. State Fish and Game officials say it's the longest ever recorded from the state's inland waters and the second heaviest pike. The interesting thing is, Wachusett Reservoir doesn't have any northern pike in it. So they think 1973, there was a lot of flooding that year, apparently, from what we can tell in the historical records and weather. They think with all the increased water levels, it came in from another river or tributary, somehow found its way into the Quinnapoxet and down into the reservoir. And I have never heard of a northern pike ever being taken in my time. I'm not saying it's possible, impossible, but I have never heard of it. So now we're up to 1976 and 1977, some more interesting things. Here's a House bill that was filed by Mr. Wetmore of Barry, who is responsible for blocking off the Prescott Peninsula at Quabbin and keeping it as a no trespassing, essentially reserve for research and protection. So now he has another bill in, which essentially is saying he wants to look at the impact of ice fishing again. So we've bumped up from the 20s to the 70s. They want to look at it. So in 1977, they get a response from basically Fish and Wildlife that the NBC is going to use. They're saying illegal ice fishing is currently going on at Wachusett, but it in no way affects the existing population because it's in such small numbers. And they're saying, if you allow this, you're going to exploit the rate of quality fish. The reason why the fish are so large and are trophy fish, record fish, is because they have a whole holdover season where they're not bothered and they're not targeted while the reservoir is frozen. If we allow ice fishing, you are going to pull more and more fish out. The record numbers will go down, the population will go down. The fact that they're not exploited year round is why they're so big. And then obviously it's interesting, it's from a fish and wildlife perspective, the public health impact to having human activity on the ice is last. If the MDC wrote it, it would be the other way around and the fishing issues would be at the bottom. But it's an interesting take, and it obviously did not pass. Now we're all the way up to 1979. Lake trout are first sampled in the Wachusett Reservoir by Mass Wildlife staff. Lake trout were not stocked at Wachusett. They're believed to have traveled through the Quabbin Aqueduct before the screens were installed on the intake. The screens have closures, but fingerlings likely could get through, or eggs. So before the screens were installed, they are just cruising down the Quabbin Aqueduct, 30 miles right to Wachusett, and filling and filling and filling and filling the reservoir full of lake trout. At the time, this is a world-class brown trout fishery, which you'll see a little bit later on in the presentation. Once the lake trout get established in Wachusett, you will see the impact that it has on other fish species. Now we hit the 1980s, getting a little bit more current. This is when I come into existence. Salmon stocking. They were stocked here. Started in 1982 in the reservoir's tributaries. Salmon started to reproduce naturally in the Stillwater River in West Boylston. There's a very specific reason why they're going up the Stillwater. If you look on your right, this is from Lee McLaughlin. There's now a fish hatchery named after him. He's running the stocking program for landlocked Atlantic salmon at Wachusett. He's saying a total of 15,900 3 to 4 inch landlocked salmon were stocked into tributaries as follows. Gates Brook, that's in West Boylston, 3 to 400. Trout Brook in Holden, that's right up on Manning Street, 3 to 400. East Wachusett Brook in Princeton, 2 to 3,000. Justice Brook, about 1,500. Stillwater River, 2 to 3,000. Quinnapoxet River in Holden, 10 to 11,000. Think about that. Why are they spawning on the Stillwater when the bulk of them were introduced to the Quinnapoxet River? And the answer is the dam. That horseshoe dam on the Quinnapoxet prevents the salmon from getting up and spawning. And the fish ladder on the right-hand side has never worked. And I found documents from Fish and Wildlife, their predecessor agencies, as soon as that dam was installed. The theory behind it, I believe, was sediment control, stopping dirt, sand, and everything from filling up the reservoir downstream. Never worked. They knew it didn't work in the 1930s. So almost since it was installed, that fish ladder never worked. And fish cannot get above it to reproduce. That dam is coming out. Designs have been done. It's coming out. They've done the studies. They have the funding. It hopefully will be within the next 2 to 3 years. It's the Department of Ecological Resources. They're going to restore it to a natural flow, kind of like a pebbly, rocky flow back up. The hope is the salmon go up there and they get stuck at the dam. They know where to go. It is ingrained in their DNA to go there. They're going to go back and spawn, and hopefully our rainbow trout will go up there as well. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but like in New York, when they go up on tributaries, they spawn and become steelheads. They got that hooked, pronounced jaw like salmon do when they spawn. For fish people, it's exciting. We'll see what happens. So we bump into the 1990s, 93, 94. Lake trout that previously entered Wachusett through the aqueduct have now established a self-sustaining population utilizing smelt as forage here at Wachusett. That's basically our history of fishing for the reservoir. Now we're going to kind of transition into, well, what's the fishery like today? What can you catch out of the reservoir? What's the population like? What do we have? This is a pretty neat picture, a whole bunch of smallmouth bass. There might be a largemouth in there somewhere. This is all caught during lake trout sampling that we'll go through. But it gives you just a little idea of what's in the reservoir. So we have 8 state fishing records. We've gained and lost some over the years. My soft spot is we lost lake trout to Quabbin for catch and keep. But you can go right down through here. The white perch, 2016, Valpercoco. That is also a world record fish, not just state. Rainbow trout, 13 pounds, 1999. Smallmouth bass, 8 pounds, 1991. That is an incredible smallmouth. People catch 6-pound smallies here all day long, and in another water body in Massachusetts, that is a trophy fish. Landlocked salmon, 10 pounds, 1985. You notice a trend here that we're starting to go? And brown trout, 19 pounds, 10 ounces, 1966. I'm willing to say that will never be broken. That is when this reservoir is a brown trout fishery, and it's world class. It has since changed. Never say never, but likely that one, hopefully, will hold. There's a new category now, catch and release. We talked about it, right? For catch and keep, by statute, by law, you have to kill the fish before you bring it in to be weighed and measured. Now, Mass Wildlife has recognized it's another category that people are interested in, catch and release. So now you can take a photo with a tape over the fish and submit that to Fish and Wildlife, and you can be in the catch and release category. Wachusett already has 3. It's only a few years old. I think it started in 2018-ish. So we have lake trout, 34 inches, 2020. That's big fish. Smallmouth bass, 23.5, 2020. And white perch, 18 inches, 2018. Nothing should get you to want to fish here more than 8 state fishing records. It's incredible. So we do something called a creel survey. They've been done historically, and one is actually in progress now. Has anybody been fishing recently this year? No? We're doing the creel survey right now as a partnership with Fish and Wildlife. So what is it? Essentially, they go around and they survey anglers. How long have you been here? What are you using? What type of bait or lures? What's your target species that you're trying to catch? And if you did catch something, what did you catch? Here's our examples over the years. 1980, this survey is Fish and Wildlife. What do we see as the bulk? Yellow perch. It's a bait fish, essentially. Then we have sunfish, smallmouth bass, rock bass, rainbow trout, and other. There's something notably missing out of that creel survey, and it's lake trout. It's 1980. Not here yet. Not in numbers that they're going to get on the creel. Fast forward 1998, also Fish and Wildlife creel. Now what do you have? 27% of the fish caught are lake trout, then sunfish, then yellow perch. Look at the yellow perch from 1980 to 1988. No Lakers, Lakers. Yellow perch are a forage fish of lake trout. They love them. They're delicious to eat if you fillet them and you catch a lot of them. The Lakers like them too. And they're usually around, yay big, and the Lakers just gobble them up. We also have largemouth and smallmouth. Now we see landlocked salmon. Obviously, they were just introduced in 1980. Now they're showing up on our creel survey. Fast forward to 2011 and 2012. This is now a partnership creel. DCR, Fish and Wildlife, and our aquatic biologists, and the Rangers are out there too. I started in 2010, so I've had the privilege of doing every DCR creel survey since they started doing it again. So what's here? Huge smallmouth bass years, 38% of the creel caught now. Then lake trout, sunfish, good section of largemouth bass. Still have landlocked salmon on there, yellow, white perch, and other. Now we do the creel survey every 5 years. The first 2 years were to establish a baseline. What is in here? What are people catching? Now it's in a maintenance phase. Every 5 years, it's done on randomized day for the entire fishing season. So our most recent completed is 2017. Smallmouth to be dipped, but it's a 5-year look, so it might not be anything abnormal. It just, there's other factors at play. Lake trout kind of increase. Could also be that year. Is it cold? Is it raining? What's the water level? Low, high? We don't know. Or do we just encounter more people 5 years later that were going for Lakers and caught them? But it's interesting information. So in 2018, we did some electrofishing with Mass Wildlife. Basically, the goal was to see what recreational and game fish were here. We knew there's salmonids, which are trout, right? We know there's lake trout now. We know there's rainbows that are introduced, they're stocked. We know there's some browns from time to time. So what other species do we have? So essentially what this is it's a boat that has a generator on it, and it can electrify the surface, and going down into the water, it stuns the fish, it does not hurt them. They float up, they get netted, they're weighed, measured, and then reintroduced. What they were targeting at the time, smallmouth bass, white perch, yellow perch, sunfish. You can kind of see it on here. We have the measuring tape, taking data, have the map. We have another picture here, same thing. We have a nice bass in the holding section right there. So pretty interesting stuff. Because again, there wasn't a lot of information from Mass Wildlife historically about, well, what's in here for other game fish? You know about the trout, but what about everything else? So what is in the reservoir? What species do we have here? So we'll just go right through them. We have the black crappie, but it's also known as the calico bass. Some things you can kind of identify here is that calico pattern, the darker to light kind of colors. There is a line right over the middle of the body, and it looks like a sunfish. Here's one caught during electrofishing. It will give you a good idea when you catch a black crappie. There's another one that it looks like that we'll see in a minute. Bluegill, right? A lot of people call this sunfish, panfish, kivers, things like that. They're sunfish, right? So here's a bluegill, good identifier. They're dark, and they have that black or really dark flap right there behind their eye on the plate right there. Here's one caught during electrofishing. You can kind of see like the tiger stripes, but that flap there is really pronounced. And there's a little yellow perch, lake trout bait. Brook trout, pretty much regarded as the most beautiful fish in the Northeast and in Massachusetts. We have native brookies here. They're in the Quinnipoxet. They're further up more towards Holden. They're typically only about this big. Most people fly fish for them, but we do have a native sustaining population of brook trout. Really good identifier, worm pattern on the top, speckled red spots throughout, and you have white and black on the face of the fins, and then red. Brown bullhead, a lot of people call this a horn pout. I'm sure you've heard that a lot. The identifier for a brown bullhead, it's the barbells. See the ones hanging out from its chin? They're brown. If you pull one out, its barbells are brown, it's a brown bullhead. Brown trout, this is what the reservoir was known for previous to the lake trout coming in. Beautiful fish, they have that brown color with red spots. They will get a hooked jaw during spawn, like a lot of the salmon do. Beautiful species. Here's the former brown trout record before the current one that's in place now, 1955. And it's really hard for me to see with my eyes, 10-pound, 12-ounce, caught Monday at the Wachusett Reservoir Causeway, measured 25.5 inches, and it's one of the largest ever caught in Massachusetts. He was using a spinning rod with 5-pound test. That must have been an amazing fight to get that fish in. And a night crawler for bait. That's awesome. He battled it for 30 minutes before bringing it in. That's great. So we have chain pickerel too. Easy to identify because we do not have northern pike. So this is that longer fish. They have razor sharp teeth. This is the one that you hook it and bring it in. You want to stay away. You don't want to go into its mouth. Use a pair of pliers to get your lure or your hook out. And they have that chain pattern going down the body. See those yellow dots all the way down? It kind of looks like chain link fence or a chain. Here's one caught during electrofishing. It's a little smaller one, but that pattern's really cool. Fall fish. Typically, you're going to see this in the Stillwater River Basin. They may be mistaken sometimes for a carp because of this diamond kind of shiny pattern on them. Probably something you're going to find in muddy, kind of really full of like turbidity, like not clear water kind of areas. And usually when I hear about one caught, it's typically on the Stillwater. Here's our big one, lake trout, also known as a laker or a forktail. And for some reason in Michigan, they're called toad. I think they might be called toad in Maine as well, just like a regional name for them. This is our claim to fame. Now, easiest way to identify a lake trout is its forked tail. No other fish is going to have a pronounced forked tail in the reservoir as this. You have that kind of worm pattern on the top again, like the brookies, the dots. You have white facing fins on this too, so it's another identifier. Here's some lake trout sampling. What they're doing here is during spawn, which for lake trout is in the fall, our biologists go out at night and they gill net around the North Dike. Whatever they catch, they immediately release it if it's not a lake trout. If it's a lake trout, they bring it into the boat, they'll measure it, weigh it, and then they put in a pit tag, which is a small little transponder here. They'll put it into the fish, does not harm them, and every time that fish is re-caught, they run every laker over a scanner. They've caught it before, scanner pops up, gives it its number, its previous dimensions, weight, everything, so they can, over time, see how fast do they grow. You know, how many do we keep re-catching? Is there a high mortality rate? Things like that. Really interesting, good information. So how do you know if you've caught a laker that has a pit tag? If you want to help keep that out in the population, right? It's actually really simple. They just snip the adipose fin. It's right before the tail on the back of the fish, does not harm them. They clip that off, does not affect their swimming or anything like that. They just clip that adipose fin. You are asked if you do catch a laker with its adipose fin removed, we would prefer if you could put that back into the reservoir. That way that biological collection and information can continue. You don't have to, but we're just asking to kind of continue that on. So there's a zoom in on the adipose fin. And again, here's a kind of zoom in with it on and it clipped. So a little interesting deep dive into lake trout. We've done some comparisons between Wachusett and lake trout, you know, the species at both. And it's something called a conditioning factor. And basically a way to think about it is Wachusett lakers have a higher conditioning factor than quad. So what does that mean? So a laker generally in Wachusett weighs more at a given length than a quad laker. This trend is still continuing for 2021 and beyond. So if you typically catch an 18-inch laker at Wachusett, it will weigh more than an 18-inch laker at quad. It has a lot to do with its forage, the water conditions, and things like that. So it's just a very interesting factor. Lake trout are really targeted at Quabbin because of the boating program. You can get to a lot of far off and deep places to get them. But it's interesting, where you can only fish from shore, you have a better chance of catching a larger, healthier fish here. And here's some Laker conditioning. This is going from 2014 to 2021. Somewhere around 99 is a good place to be. And we're running that trend right across here, right around just under 100, right? This is Wachusett. Now look at Quabbin. Quabbin has gone up and tanked. And in 2021, it's all the way down to just a little over 98. So Quabbin's had a lot of fluctuations. They've been very high, as far up as almost 101.5, but they've plummeted recently. And that's what they're investigating. Why? What has gone on? Again, water conditions, forage fish, smelt, things like that. So it's things that our aquatic biologists are always looking at. But it's just more backup that here at Wachusett, the conditioning factor is better. And here is a 40-inch Laker caught during some point. This was gill netted. Its eyeball is the size of a human eye. It's crazy. This is a 40-inch Laker. There are people that have dove in front of the dam in Clinton, all the way down to the bottom for inspections, maintenance, anecdotal, but they're saying that there's fish that were bigger than them in the reservoir. It's not really a big stretch, right? 20 inches more and it's 60 inches. It's someone that's 5 feet wide. So there are lake trout as large as a person in the reservoir. They likely live at the bottom, 120 feet, never come up, have no need to, have everything they need down there, and probably are quite content to stay there. But it's an interesting thing to think about. We also have our landlocked salmon, probably our second most premier fish. Here's one down the bottom, really easy to identify, that silver, body on it with the black speckles. When they spawn, they will get the hooked jaw. They can change colors, not things like you may see in Alaska, where they turn bright orange on coho and things, but the color will change a little bit and they'll definitely get that hooked jaw. This is typically up on the Stillwater River. They spawn in the fall after the fall season's usual first significant rain event. That's when you want to be on the Stillwater in the area of Sterling. Largemouth bass. Easy ways to identify, the mouth extends past the eye. So when you catch a largemouth and you hold that mouth open and you close it to release it, if that mouth goes past the eye, you have a largemouth. Other good identifier is a line, horizontal line right down the body. Typically they are bigger than smallmouth. I've seen a 10, 12 pound largemouth taken out of the reservoir. It's more rare, but they're in there. And your typical Laker smallmouth is between maybe 5 to 6 pounds. So they're typically larger, but those are some good identifiers. And here's one caught during electrofishing. The line's a little tough, looks more broken up, but it's there. Here's a pumpkin seed, also known sunfish, kibber, easy identifiers. It's a lot lighter than the bluegill. We have the blue war paint down its face, and we have that little pumpkin seed on its flap, that little orange or red spot right there. It's a really good way to see one. You've got all that blue going right down in the red plate. Again, during electrofishing. Rainbow smelt, here's our forage fish. This is what pretty much drives the reservoir's fishing population. They do now spawn on the shoals, so they spawn on the shore. They spawn in the spring. Typically when you're going to see them is in March. Before the fishing season opens is when you want to go. If you go down to where Fish and Wildlife has their district office, there's a large parking lot there on Temple Street, 211 Temple Street. Go in gate 22, walk straight to the shoreline. And then in March, if there's no snow, walk the shoreline and you will see tens of thousands of dead smelt on the shoreline. They've just spawned. So it's a good indicator of how may that fishing season go. If you don't see a lot of smelt, maybe the forage number's down, maybe the fishing season won't be as good. And here's a school of them. And you can see how it flashes there like a mirror when the light hits it right. And here's one in real life, washed up on shore. You can kind of see that rainbow. They're delicious. Some places still sell them. They fry them whole and you just pick them up and eat them. Big Y, I think, is still doing it in some places. So I recommend if you want to try an interesting snack, get fried rainbow smelt. They're delicious. Rainbow trout, easy to identify. They have that pink rainbow line running right down the body. These are stocked. They typically don't do well when they're hooked. If they bleed, it's usually a good indicator they will not survive. So even if you are a catch and release angler, you may want to keep that fish. It's probably not going to live. You could donate to someone or cook it up when you get home. but just kind of something to be aware of. But if they don't bleed a lot, you can usually get them to go back out. They can hold over, meaning they can survive another season after stocking. It's not frequent, but they can do it. And when they do, when they keep going and going, then that's when you get those 10, pound rainbows that can happen. Here's a rock bass, bit of a misnomer. It's a sunfish. Kind of look like that calico, right? You have that kind of black speckled spots on there. They're definitely around the reservoir, and they're actually right down the street, right down here at the end of Scar Hill, gate 13. There's a bunch of rock bass right there in the cove. So if you're looking to get one for a catch and release record, you could always go down there and check it out. And here's one caught in lake trout sampling. This is another one, like sunfish. You see the fin on the top of the fish, it spikes. When you catch this and you want to release it, you need to start at the front and work your way down to fold those spikes down. I'm sure we've all been there, that we've all gotten stuck in our hands. So be careful with the rock bass. Here's our smallies, smallmouth bass. Great identifier on these. Typically they'll have a red eye. The mouth is shorter than past the eye, so it ends before the eye, and we have vertical tiger stripes on these. They show up more and more the bigger that they get. And here's one caught during lake trout sampling. This is one of our aquatic biologists' joy, and you can see the tiger stripes. White perch. We have a line down. We have a mirror pattern on its cheek, just behind its eye. They're typically, 1 to 2 pounds. They will get into the 3-pound range, like the world record, but they're in there, and we'll see a couple of them. Here is our world record. It's essentially a football. It's huge. And again, this is Val Rococo out of Leominster. Her and her siblings and her father are very well known here. Her father's been fishing here for, I'm probably underestimating it, 50 years. Very well known, regular, great, conservationalist family. Spent a lot of time here around the reservoir. So it's great that that kind of legacy has been passed on to the next generation here. 3 pounds, 8 ounces, 18 inches long, and 13.5 inches around. That's crazy. They are in there, and there are more and more 3-pound white perch. So do some investigation if you want to find where those are. I can't give it away. Here's one caught during lake trout sampling. Look at the difference. Football, not football. So it's a healthy fish. White sucker. Bottom feeders, again, with these, you're typically going to find them in those more turbid areas, muddy areas, and it's typically here at Wachusett, it's on the Stillwater River. And usually at night. And here we are at night during lake trout sampling with a sucker. And again, could be confused for a carp because of that pattern, but they have that, that different mouth for, how they feed with the sucker. But it could happen. So we do hear from time to time that someone caught a carp or thinks there's carp in the reservoir. To our knowledge, there are not. And this is probably just mis-ID. Yellow bullhead. So how do we determine the yellow bullhead? Look at the barbels. They're yellow or white. They're not brown. So you have a horn pout. Well, which one do I have? That's the way that you're going to find out. And here's a really good picture of the yellow barbels during sampling. Yellow perch. These, the forage fish, bait fish, lakers love them. These are legal to use, as a bait fish while you're fishing the reservoir. Lake trout love them. So if you hook and line a yellow perch, if you target them, you can put it right back on your line, throw it out, and then try to get a laker to come in and grab it. There's a lot of these below the Wachusett Dam at the start of the natural river, right at the lip where the fountain spills over. They kind of all congregate down there. So if you're looking for a place to catch some bait, yellow perch, it's a good spot. And here's one caught during electrofishing. Pretty cool. We get the tiger stripes. That's the end. I just do want to acknowledge our internal DCR, Division of Water Supply Protection, Wachusett section aquatic biologists. They're not all in the same positions, but at the time, Jamie Carr, Joy Trahan-Liptak, and Max Nyquist. Max and Joy are currently part of the current 2022 Creel Survey. Mass Wildlife's aquatic biologist, Jason Stolarski, he helped a ton with Mass Wildlife's archives in Westboro. He's also currently working on the 2022 Creel Survey. Our agency-wide archivist, Sean Fisher, is an amazing resource. He can be found online. If you go on mass.gov and go to DCR's page and you search archives, his information will show up. If there's anything you ever want to research around the watershed properties, Sean is your point of contact if it's really, really deep diving and you need something from the archives. And also, Division of Fisheries and Wildlife report, basically their history, 1866 to 2012 by James Hendricks. And that's available on mass.gov. And I thank you very much for coming to the program and being an attentive audience. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good.